Don't believe the hype about renewable energy. For years, green-leaning politicians, activists, and the media have told us that wind and solar power hold all the answers to our energy troubles. We're told that switching from dirty old fossil fuels to eco-friendly renewables will not only help save the planet, but could save us money on our energy bills too. Harnessing the power of the wind and the sun, they say, will give us cheap, limitless energy. Apparently, a new era of green energy abundance could be just around the corner, if only we were prepared to junk fossil fuels. There's just one small problem with this narrative. None of it is true. The world's renewable energy experiment has been running for several decades now, and it has turned out to be a colossal failure. So here are 4 reasons why renewables are rubbish. Number 1, the cost. The UK's Tory government says homegrown renewable energy is vital for bringing down bills for families. The opposition Labour Party similarly says that it's cheaper to invest in renewables than it is to keep burning fossil fuels. But in truth, the cost of renewable energy tends to go in only one direction, and that's up. In the UK, renewable energy firms are paid a guaranteed subsidised price for their electricity. The government agrees to this price before wind farms and solar panels are even built. The idea is that investment now will spur innovation and lead to cheaper renewable projects in the future. In theory, the more mature wind and solar technology becomes, the cheaper it will be to install and utilise. But that never seems to work out in practice. During the last round of negotiations with the energy firms, the British government agreed to hike the price it would pay for offshore wind by a whopping 70%. Energy that was supposed to cost us £44 per megawatt hour is now going to cost us £73 per megawatt hour, which will soon translate into higher energy bills. This is not just a UK problem either. Everywhere you look, everywhere wind and solar have been embraced with enthusiasm, you see energy bills going up rather than down. Even before the war in Ukraine sent energy prices into the stratosphere, costs were rising around the world thanks to our growing reliance on renewable energy. Just take California, the renewables capital of the United States. Between 2011 and 2017, electricity prices surged at a rate 5 times faster than the rest of the US, thanks largely to California's embrace of solar power and its abandonment of nuclear. This has triggered an exodus of blue-collar jobs to other states. Or take Germany, which has invested more in wind and solar than any other country on Earth. The so-called Energiewende, Germany's policy of phasing out fossil fuels and nuclear energy, led electricity prices to rise by 50% between 2006 and 2017. This gave Germany the most expensive electricity in Europe. And today, as the energy crisis bites, the situation is even more dire. Germany, once the engine of the European economy, is on the verge of collapse.
Tens of thousands of protesters in Germany took to the streets in response to the energy crisis.
It's a cold and dark time.
Energy-intensive industries are the first to feel the pinch.
The renewables it's invested in just haven't been able to do the job of the power plants they replaced. Renewables aren't saving us money. They're pushing already cash-strapped nations even deeper into the red. Number 2, reliability. The most fundamental problem with renewables is that they're intermittent and unreliable. In other words, wind farms can't produce energy when the wind doesn't blow, and solar farms can't produce energy when the sun doesn't shine. This is hardly ideal for a modern industrialised society where we need to access electricity on demand, any time of day, any time of year. And it gets worse. Renewables actually stop producing much of their electricity at precisely the time of year when we need it most. That is, in the winter. You could probably guess that longer nights and colder days are not ideal conditions for solar power, but wind speeds tend to be far lower in winter too. The Germans have even coined a new word for this, Dunkelflaute, to describe that time of year when renewable energy is functionally useless. The problems don't stop there either. Nature is unpredictable. Sometimes the wind can also blow too fast, or the sun can burn too brightly, and this is no good either. In the UK, we paid £215 million to wind farm operators last year to compensate them for all the days when the wind was blowing too hard. Too much wind means the turbines have to be switched off, Otherwise, the national grid would become dangerously overloaded. It's the same story with solar. Whenever the sun shines too brightly, there's a huge risk of blowouts. And so, on the sunniest days of the year, California pays neighbouring states to take some of its excess solar power. So long as we're relying on the sun or the wind in this way, we'll be held hostage to variations in the weather. It's a lesson we should have learned from our ancestors. For millennia, humans relied on the power of the wind to sail ships or to rotate windmills and grind grains. Then came the Industrial Revolution. Suddenly, humanity unlocked the vast amounts of energy stored in coal, oil, gas, and later uranium. With the arrival of fossil fuels and their nuclear power, we were suddenly able to use energy pretty much wherever and whenever we wanted. We were no longer forced to rely on the whims of the weather. Putting all of our faith in weather-dependent renewables means turning back the clock on that brilliant leap forward. Number 3. Storage. Now you might be thinking that there's an obvious solution to the intermittency problem. What if we just store all that extra energy we get from wind and solar farms on the days when it's particularly windy or sunny? Can't batteries just hold on to all that energy for us? Unfortunately, no. The technology just isn't there. The battery storage facilities that currently exist can only hold enough electricity to power the grid for an extra few hours. They can't hold the days and weeks worth of energy we'd need to tide us over during the winter. What's more, the cost of storing all this electricity, even if we could manage it, would be astronomical. A battery that could store a wind farm's worth of electricity could cost 80 times more to build than the wind farm itself. According to the MIT Technology Review, building a battery system for the US that could store wind and solar energy for just 12 hours would cost around $2.5 trillion at current prices. That's about a third of all US federal government spending, and more than 4 times as much as it cost to build the entire US interstate highway system. Even if all that money were available, the materials we'd need to construct these batteries are not. The lithium, cobalt, and rare earth minerals that are critical to battery production are just not being mined in those kinds of quantities right now. A battery-powered future is a fool's errand. Number 4. The environment. Okay, so there are some big problems with renewables, but at least they're great for the environment, right? Well, not exactly. Even by the supposed standards of environmentalists, who seem to care more about Mother Earth than their fellow human beings, renewables are far from green. The open secret of the renewables revolution is just how much it relies upon those supposedly nasty fossil fuels. Governments love to proclaim that their nations are powered by wind and solar, but behind the scenes, every advanced country has a fleet of fossil fuel power stations on standby for whenever the weather goes awry. In Britain, we tend to use natural gas to fill these gaps. In Germany, the government has recently been forced to return to burning coal whenever its renewables aren't working. This year, German energy giant RWE even dismantled one of its wind farms because there were coal reserves beneath it. As energy supplies are squeezed amid the global energy crisis, our leaders have been forced into a desperate reverse ferret. The fossil fuels they love to hate are the only things that can rescue them from blackouts. Even German Greens know, deep down, that coal is a better bet than wind for a nation that's desperate to keep the lights on. And then there's the materials you need to manufacture renewable energy infrastructure. Some of the critical components of wind and solar farms are actually derived from fossil fuels. The blades of wind turbines are actually made from carbon fibre, which is impossible to make without oil and gas. The prime ingredient in solar panels, polysilicon, cannot be made without coal. Then you need to find a place to start putting all of these wind turbines and solar panels. Unlike a nuclear plant or a gas-powered plant, wind and solar farms take up vast amounts of space. This is mainly because they're so inefficient. A solar farm would need to be 450 times larger than a nuclear power plant if you wanted to produce the same amount of energy. Using more land inevitably means more environmental disruption, which is precisely what Greens claim to be against. What's more, when a solar farm is decommissioned, it produces 300 times more toxic waste than a nuclear power plant does. And while nuclear waste is stored safely underground, solar waste tends to be dumped in landfill, thanks to the huge cost of recycling it. Of course, energy production, no matter what energy source you use, is going to be a messy business. The supposed environmental downsides of all this are an incredibly small price to pay for living in an advanced, developed society, enjoying material comforts even our recent ancestors couldn't have dreamed of. But even on eco-warriors' own terms, renewable energy is hardly the clean, green panacea it's being made out to be. Plus, it's expensive and unreliable to boot. Forget what you've been told about renewables. They're not going to cut our energy bills, they can't be relied on to keep the lights on, and even the green claims made for them are totally overblown. So let's ditch the fantasy of a world powered by wind and solar, and let's fight for a future of cheap, reliable and plentiful energy instead.